The aim of our project is to improve the relationship between government and civil society in Ukraine and Moldova. So it's very broad. When we were planning the detail of the project with all the partners in the two countries, we agreed that we should try and emphasize the existing mechanisms, for example in Ukraine the civic councils, and how they can be improved, rather than suggesting new approaches and new legislation. We wanted to improve what's existing. And the methodology was focused on changing the mindset, so that you move from a dynamic where civil society complains and government ignores them, to a dynamic where civil society offers solutions and the government listens to them, and where appropriate they work with civil society to implement those solutions. So it's changing the culture of both civil society and government to view each other not always as in opposition, but even sometimes as in cooperation.
So what's your main challenges you have for these 2 years for yourself as project manager for all project?
Well, one of the main challenges was that there were a number of elections in both Ukraine and Moldova over the last 2 years. Now, our methodology relied on the fact that individuals within government institutions and within civil society would be able to meet each other a number of times throughout these recurring roundtable forums, so that they could build trust, build understanding, build relationships, and then build these concrete examples of cooperation. Because we had both national and local elections in both countries in the last 2 years, the public officials kept changing. So one of the big challenges for us was to have any kind of continuity in the relationships we were trying to build, because things kept changing because of the elections.
So it's main challenge, yeah?
I think that was the biggest challenge.
What about difference between Moldovan and Ukrainian participants? It was a problem for you, or understanding our minds or behaviors?
The mindset was not as challenging as I was expecting. Maybe I had prejudices. Of course, there were some challenges around what people have defined as the Soviet mindset. So people are very reluctant to try new things, to take responsibility. Often people are very passive. I'll never forget the first international steering group meeting that we had here in Kiev. And we were asking small groups to discuss ways in which the upcoming study visit could be defined. And they kept asking questions for clarification. Should we discuss for 3 minutes or for 4 minutes? Who will appoint a chair for our small group to lead the discussions? Who will define the parameters of the discussions? And for me, these questions were very unusual. I was expecting them just to take responsibility and do it in their own way. They can decide how many minutes they speak for. They can decide who their chairperson is. But they seem to want everything decided for them. So there was a reluctance to actually take decisions proactively. And that was a slight cultural issue, which I think was an interesting lesson for the project. But it's something that we overcame, because in the end, lots of people, even from the older generation within civil society, were willing to work with this proactive approach. The most important lesson for me is that we talked a lot in this project about good practice from other parts of Europe, so particularly from the UK and from different countries in the European Union. What really surprised me and what really impressed me is that actually, even before this project started, across Ukraine and Moldova, you have very specific examples of good practice, government-civil society cooperation already happening. And so one of the big challenges for us, rather than trying to stimulate these examples where they don't exist, which was one of our aims, but we could also look for examples that already existed. And I didn't realize that that would be so easy when we began, but actually if you look hard enough, even in the regions in the four oblasts, Kherson, Sumy, Poltava, and Luhansk, where we're working, there are some very good examples of cooperation that are already in existence.
I know you are leading a Euclid network for studying in the USA. I think you have something to be proud after this project, so maybe what is it?
My biggest personal pride for this project is that we basically achieved everything that we wanted to. And that was not so easy because we had such an ambitious project. And then, even with this ambitious project, the budget was cut. Initially we were focusing on Moldova, Ukraine and Belarus. Although Belarus was only a small part of the project, when the Belarusian government told the UN, no, we don't want this project, we lost a third of our budget. So suddenly we had a very ambitious project with a much lower budget than we initially predicted. At the same time, we had all these different partners. We have 6 partners in this project now. And so it was very challenging, and I was concerned that we wouldn't be able to achieve anything. We have very ambitious aims, we have a very unstable environment politically with all these elections, and then we had this changing financial picture. But we've actually managed to achieve some really positive things. All of the partners at the end of the project seem happy with how things are going. The collaboration's been very positive between our 6 partners, and for me, I'm just delighted to have been a part of something that made a small difference.